Hi everyone, it's time for another Clektive Thinking episode, and today we've got something a little bit different lined up. Today, stepping in for Elliot, I'm joined by Ben Tunstall, Director of Consumer Industries at Snowflake. Ben, it's great to have you here with me today. How are you doing?
Very good. Thanks for having me, Chris. Glad to be here.
The pleasure is all mine. The pleasure is all mine. Now, Ben, just to start off with it'd be great if we can just get a little bit more of an overview actually of your role at Snowflake and kind of what exactly is involved with that. So are we okay to start off there and just get a bit more understanding of what exactly that is?
Yeah, certainly. So I've done nearly every sales role there is at Snowflake since we started in the UK. I was one of the early employees nearly 8 years ago. My role now is leading our new business efforts into what we call consumer industries, as you said. That is fundamentally every vertical that is B2C focused. Naturally, the lion's share of that, and certainly the lion's share of our focus on that, Chris, is retail and CPG, which is where a lot of the organisations still in real need of transformation, and those goalposts continue to move. So, my role is leading the team, both of a go-to-market strategy and then a group of both account executives, solution engineers, SDRs across the board of how we go to market across those verticals.
No, thanks, Ben. It's a really interesting overview. And I think certainly from my perspective, it's fair to say that you're kind of responsible and have been responsible for driving some of the biggest retail brands really in the world to kind of move forward in their vision of becoming data-driven. What would you say from your experience and working with these organizations? Why is Snowflake often the ideal fit for an organization to build their kind of data on, essentially?
Yeah, you know what? The answer to that has evolved over the years. When I joined, it was retailers who weren't alone, to be honest. Most enterprises were struggling with fundamental data warehousing problems. If I go back to 2018, 2019 especially. The timing then was for a lot of legacy deprecation, moving to the cloud. That posed the question of how do we make best use of the cloud from a data and analytics point of view. And looking back now, at the time, those problems felt incredibly complicated. That's not to say that they're not, but I think what's changed and evolved is the value you can unlock from data has, by some magnitudes, exploded. I'm not sure it's going to be lost on anyone listening or watching that the advent of AI is beyond hype curve and is very much a reality today. So why Snowflake? For retail specifically, there's probably just three core things I'd boil it down to. I think is that first one, and this goes for, and it's not unique to retail, if I'm being honest, is this first one, but it's we abstract complexity. Snowflake under the covers is an incredibly advanced and high-powered analytical data and AI platform. It does not feel like an incredibly advanced platform, or should I say, it does not feel like a very complicated one. So our product and engineering have consistently done a fantastic job of abstracting complexity away and lowering the bar to entry. And really, that's all about spending more time on what matters as opposed to more time on heavy lifting. And that's consistent across all industries. I'd put that down to one of the key reasons Snowflake's been so successful over the years. I suppose the second reason for retail specifically is we came to market with a unique selling point with data sharing. Because of the way we're architected, your ability to share data, both within an organization, a large, complex, multifaceted business, but probably more critically with sharing data and receiving data from external second and third party data. That's unique to retail as a unique selling point, because as the ecosystem grows, every Snowflake customer shares fundamentally the same tenancy. And it means that the availability of valuable data assets, products, and services is so easy to access and then incorporate into your own data strategy and data products. Which, if we think about retail as a fundamental business, they're all nuanced and different, right? But we can take some of the largest supermarkets, for example. Majority of the SKUs they sell are not their own. It's a supermarket works based on the brands that it sells on the most part. And I think, we can look at Sainsbury's as an example of that, a very early adopter of Snowflake in the UK, who've done a fantastic job of putting data at the heart of the organization. And the downstream impact of that has been phenomenal, right? And I'd argue that Nectar is the most successful and most personalized loyalty scheme in the UK, as an example. So I think the data sharing aspect has been really key for retail. And I think the third piece is now more current. The third point is consistently how we've abstracted complexity away from data engineering over the years, from analytics, both ad hoc and dashboarding, for example, data warehousing, data sharing. Now it's abstracting complexity away from not just downstream artificial intelligence, right? Which call it downstream, but agentic solutions, which has come about very, very quickly and is being industrialized, both successfully and quite unsuccessfully, depending on the organization. But today, what sets us apart is upstream AI. Call it AI assisted development, AI assisted engineering, wherever it may be. And I think why that's important, if we're talking about an industry such as retail and CPG, is the most common challenge across, every CDO, CIO, COO that we speak to, who's not yet a customer. Most common challenge tends to be a human bottleneck in the organization, which is best case delaying, worst case completely blocking business demand for data products and insight. And what we've found just in the last few months, which is where upstream AI has really come into its own. We call it Snowflake Cortex Code, or COCO for short. Where it's really had an impact is, and I'm not exaggerating when I say it's like 20x output for a data team to ship product, if you want to call it that. Right, deliver use cases, deliver demand for the business, whether it's a federated model or it's a centralized data team model. The impact of that has been huge. And, not if you compare retail to, say, the gaming sector or the technology sector or even the finance sector, there tends to be a higher volume of data-focused employees in those organizations. Whereas retail has a much higher density of non-technical staff, which is where once you combine upstream AI capabilities and the power of that with abstracting complexity, i.e. making it actually really easy to do, everyone becomes more than just a prompt engineer as well.
Yeah.
Right? So it's, the biggest change, certainly a significant change in the discussions we're having at the executive level in retailers is, going back to, let's just say 2020, for example, it was about how do we expand, the term, we want to drive self-service, right?
Yeah.
And I always ask, what does that mean? Because
True self-service, what exactly is that? Yeah,
everyone has a different meaning of like, okay, I want to drive self-service, I want to industrialize insight, I want to democratize data. Well, all of those have different definitions, depends on who you ask. But I think it was really quite limited, or rather quite finite to data skilled individuals in an organization. So it was, we want to democratize data to the domain owners of data, the marketing analysts, the financial analysts, the BI developers. And yes, fundamentally, everyone can be a dashboard user. And, for them, self-service meant we just want them to be able to drill down on data a bit more.
Yeah.
Which today feels like less than table stakes, right?
Yeah.
So that now, even in a retailer with 50,000 employees, with 40,000 of them being shop floor, for example, there's no reason why every single one of those can't be a prompt engineer for that organization to use data and not rely on humans, and therefore avoid human bottlenecks, to make informed decisions, not gut feel decisions. So, I've always said that technology is a catalyst for change. It's not the change. Anyone who thinks it's a silver bullet, doesn't matter how good the tech is, it's only a small part, and frankly, the easiest part of any transformation. But I feel like the amount of change that technology, and certainly Snowflake, can have an impact on now is very real, right?
Yeah.
And so I think they're probably the three bullet points I'd give to answer that.
Definitely. No, thank you, Ben. That's a really detailed answer. And what's actually really interesting for me to kind of take away from that is, although distinct in those individual points, I think the thread throughout there is that transition, and it almost reflects that Snowflake journey that you mentioned, from the pure technical kind of old terminology of the data warehouse right through to being the data platform, and its real focus being on from the technical teams to the business value. And it's kind of, how can we have data at the heart of any retail or other organization? And, that increase in demand for data, not just from IT and technical teams, from the finance teams, from marketing, from those who are kind of boots on the ground, so to speak. That's really where, we're seeing that transition. And we've spoken about it in previous episodes of this podcast. We know there's kind of countless reports and guides available. There's a lot of noise around AI, specifically as this area continues to develop. And I think what we can see from our side is, there's a lot of mixed messaging. And what I'd be quite keen to ask from your side, Ben, is, in your opinion, and from having the experience that you've had, what do you think, maybe for retail or maybe for organizations in general, but what do you think is the kind of biggest opportunity right now here as we stand and as we speak?
Yeah, so I think the biggest opportunities, it depends. If I put myself in the shoes of a chief data officer, for example, and said CDO is tasked with defining a new data strategy today, the first consideration, let's take two examples. The first would be a retailer or a brand that has yet to deliberately or in earnest invest heavily in a big data transformation at this point. And the other example I'll talk to is one that maybe has, because it is different and it's unique at the moment. Because I would argue that a CDO or an organization that has yet to sink significant investment into big data transformation might just be in a more advantageous position.
Okay.
Certainly commercially speaking.
Yeah.
Or economically speaking, rather, than one that already has. Because the one that already has got arguably 10 years of fatigue, or more, right? Big data has been a subject for well over a decade. So, and what we're finding is, certainly with a lot of large retailers and large brands, is it's not necessarily produced the value. Perhaps they've not measured the value very, very well, but it's not necessarily produced the value and the confidence in the value of data and AI, because they've sunk X million, billion, some of them, right? And the results maybe aren't as clear, or haven't had the desired outcome of putting data at the heart of the organization. I'd argue there's a lot more of those than ones who've successfully done it, actually.
Right. Okay.
So to then arrive and speak to a CDO, an organization, you're arriving in a different way. You're almost arriving with a lot more humility, and to say, we know that you've tried to transform and it's broadly worked, right? Has it provided you competitive advantage over the last 10 years, right? Has your market share dramatically increased? And you can non-tenuously connect that to the investments that you've made in data. And the biggest investment they'll ever make in data is human capital.
Yeah.
Beyond any platform, beyond any technology. So, and the reason I say that an organization that may have been considered a laggard for not investing in big data over the last 10, 20 years, if they now have the appetite for change, which they should have, because you know it is change or die. But What's interesting is they don't have the fatigue. They might have fatigue from their legacy platforms and legacy processes and not having enough data talent in their eyes. But the advantage they've got is that if I'm a CDO writing a brand new data strategy today, the human capital element, i.e. the most expensive part of the data strategy, certainly the plan, doesn't need to require the same expensive data talent, in my opinion. I don't think I'm alone in this opinion, right?
Yeah.
Because I think industry and vertical and organization specific skills are now becoming more valuable for a data professional to have than data skills specifically. And I'm laboring the point a bit, but like I can now create data applications. I do quite regularly for my job.
Yeah.
The only programming language I know is English.
It's crazy, isn't it? Yeah, it really is crazy, the kind of amount of development that we've seen in this space, and even non-technical users being able to actually go in and prompt and build out these products. Yeah, it's remarkable, really, isn't it?
And it's not to say that PhD level data scientists don't have value. They have tons of value because everything gets easier for them too, so their output increases. But talking specifically around retailers and a data strategy there, I've heard a few CDOs call it, or certainly a few CIOs and CDOs call it a leapfrog strategy.
Yeah.
Which is we don't need to go into a large, big data migration, big platform migration, big human capital investment, finding difficult skills in an industry which is not rife with a ton of specialized skills in data. We can leapfrog all of that.
Yeah.
Rather than data transformation program, it's an AI transformation program. And as I said, that doesn't just transform the data team and the technology department, or if you've got a data mesh, even the federated teams, but rather every single employee of the organization. And that's far beyond just unlocking, Copilot for everyone, right? It's how can a CDO, and in my opinion, it should be in partnership with the COO, embed AI genuinely into as many workflows as possible, not to replace human beings, because I think where the focus is if your average salary in the organization is £50,000, I would always ask what's the productivity output of that. If the average is 50,000 cost, a really healthy output might be £100,000 of value.
Yeah.
How do we turn £100 of value to £200,000 of value, as opposed to saving 50 grand on the bottom line?
Yeah.
And looking at it from that department. So I think that the data strategy is now actually a much bigger strategy that requires almost a larger plan, but it should be more cost effective and much faster to implement. That does still leave some hard yards though, because you do need to deprecate legacy technology.
Well, that's it, isn't it? Yeah, there's always going to be that kind of switch, isn't there, and the effort involved and kind of, understanding, engaging that. But I think that comes back to the point you mentioned earlier, Ben, which is around as well, kind of the tangibility and making sure that that measurement of value is there, because that's what's ultimately going to drive it forward. And, I think certainly one of the points you touched on there, kind of that requirement for the expensive data talent and putting yourselves in the shoes of a CDO or CIO. I'm going to ask potentially a bit of a controversial question, but is that where you think the data, the responsibility for data in an organization will sit moving forward? Or could that potentially change as we move into this more kind of business value driven approach to data?
So just to rephrase, keep me honest, the reporting line of data in an organization.
Yeah, for example, yeah.
Well, it's one of the biggest changes I've seen as well, Chris, the last few years. We've always tried to engage the chief financial office, because fundamentally that's where spend goes, right?
Yeah.
And it comes from, kind of. In the last 12 months, especially, I would argue we're engaging with CFOs more than we are CIOs.
Okay.
At least the same amount. Yeah. At least the same amount. And not just at like when we get to a commercial discussion. And I think there's a couple of reasons for this. I think my sometimes unpopular opinion is that I think the chief data officer of an organization should report to the CEO. They should be a member of the Exco board. That's not more often they report to a CIO,
Yeah.
or a COO, which is great, or a CFO, which is rarer in a public organization. But the minute an organization top down views data as an asset, as a product value center, the sooner that that's apparent, and there's no better way to make it apparent than to have the reporting line reflect that. The sooner they do that, the faster things move. The operating model is far more start with the outcome, reverse engineer it. The problem with, historically data has nearly always started as a business unit within IT, and that's still okay. But I think the legacy to that is data was a byproduct of IT and technology as opposed to a product for the organization.
Yeah.
And, I think in a perfect world, the CDO reports directly to the CEO, which is becoming more common. But in, a close second place is, especially in the world of AI, a COO or a CFO.
Yeah, I think it instills that culture, doesn't it? It's also that element of, with data being a kind of forefront of the business in a way that you're explaining there, Ben, it ensures that everybody across the organization, when you mentioned earlier, every employee now has the ability to have this data at their fingertips. It instills that vision and it instills that kind of culture to say that, look, this isn't just something that gets, fobbed off, for want of a better term, to the IT or to the data team. It's, no, this is in your hands, and you should really want to harness the power that's available through AI.
I'll tell you one thing that's quite interesting, Chris.
Yeah, fire away.
I've been in tech thicker end of 20 years now, and this moment in time where, as it stands, is reminding me of my first software job, which was mobile security software. It allowed individuals to use their own personal iPhones and iPads for work.
Okay.
For work email, for calendar, and that was about it, really. And it containerized it, made it secure, etc. Because back then they had no native security on Apple devices. And the reason the velocity was so incredible and the uptake was so incredible is because everyone in their personal life was using a device, was engaging with technology which they liked, and had a positive impact. And they came to work and they put their BlackBerry down. And I don't want my company provided BlackBerry. I just want what I've got on my BlackBerry, but I want it on my iPad.
Used to.
Yeah, I'm already trained on how to use this device because I've trained myself. The parallel that I'm drawing is that, whether you're working on the shop floor of John Lewis, right, or you're the chief financial officer of Diageo, you are using ChatGPT or Word or one of these every single day. Like you've already trained yourself to be a prompt engineer. So, actually the enablement curve, which is the biggest blocker to cultural change, right, is providing the enablement. It should also be incredibly fast. But people are using ChatGPT at work, probably asking it work questions, probably a huge security risk, right, if companies haven't locked it down. But frankly, at the end of the day, people are using their own devices and they're punching in, sensitive data they're not aware is sensitive. It's a huge risk. So you need to provide that capability to every employee because there's now an expectation, right? The same way that if you're a retailer or a brand, your customers have an expectation of, they've had an expectation for years when it comes to digital, right, and e-commerce, but now agentic commerce, right, which is something we've not even touched on today, but it's
scratching the surface. Yeah.
So I think leaders of, retailers large and small, brands large and small, I think should capitalize on the fact that they already have an AI-enabled workforce. They just haven't given them the technical capabilities company provided yet to make use of it. So I think that's quite interesting, is that, you're trying to make everyone data-driven in previous years. Well, people don't go home and refresh Tableau in their own life, right? They don't need, people barely use spreadsheets for their own life.
Yeah.
It's a work thing, right? So when people are passionate about it, they're using their own lives. I think there's a head start there that leaders can take advantage of.
Definitely. No, I would 100% agree with that. And actually, it's really interesting. It aligns with something we've spoken about previously on this podcast, which is that concept of kind of shadow AI. And like where you say, employees within organizations who are probably using ChatGPT, Perplexity, other tools, when actually what Snowflake is enabling you to do is use that same user interface, use that same front end almost, but actually apply that with your data and your insights. And that granularity is just, it's mind blowing, isn't it? Compared to where we were even, 6 months ago in some cases, the actual power that could be put at, and to your point earlier, the power that is at every single employee's thing. It's not just those wizards in the data team that know how to get the answers. It's everyone. And I think that's really where, from our perspective, we're seeing Snowflake as a really kind of powerful platform on that journey.
Yeah, it's, we've give you an idea of a use case we've been working on recently. I won't say the name of a customer, but a very large retailer, right? It's giving the power to a store manager of one of their, I think they've got thousands of stores actually, giving the power for them to decide with asking the question, what product should I put where in the store, at what point, what should be prominent? That's question number one. What should be prominent, and what level of stock do I need for the next week to ensure we don't stock out, but we don't overstock? And also, how should it be priced? How, from a category manager point of view, how, if it's a product that other retailers sell, for example, how should it be priced to ensure that we're competitive? And then how do we promote that? Well, if you were a shop manager, first of all, you probably wouldn't even be empowered to ask that question before.
Yeah.
You'd have to lead on a merchandising team, a promotional pricing team, a category manager team. I don't know. That sort of thing would have to be planned weeks in advance, right?
Yeah.
So even the most agile ones in the last couple of years, days in advance. Now you do it in the morning, you turn up. It's like shift those SKUs to the front of the store over there, price them at this much.
And it's a really good point, actually, because not only to your point there about, the timeliness of this, rather than it being planned weeks ahead, it's live, it's at your fingertips right now. The other thing, and I won't bore you with my background, but as someone who's previously been in retail myself, it's that point of this is no longer something that goes to head office and a team somewhere making decisions on your behalf. You can really, hone it in on what you're experiencing, whether it's merchandising, whether it's stock levels, pricing, all those things you've mentioned. And it's, again, the power's at your fingertips. You're not relying on somebody else. It's actually, how can we bring this in-house and really own that, and own not only the data and what's in there, but actually the value that will drive and the efficiencies that will come out of that. And that's a really kind of powerful case to put that in the hands of a store or an area manager to say, you own this now.
And I think, going back to the point around cultural change, even if you're wrong, even if, that it's week one of the large language models that you're using and of the semantic layer you've built, and actually, garbage in, garbage out, maybe that's still relevant because you've just decided to chuck an agent over poor data. At the end of the day, like, even if that's where you start, right, which, by the way, we'd always make sure you don't start there, but even if that is hypothetically where you'd start, decisiveness is better than indecision,
100%.
So if before it would take months for someone to make that decision on a certain promotion, on a certain initiative, but now it can just be decided in the morning. Well, you'll be able to know if it's worked by the next day, and you'll be able to review it in near real time, and then make changes and iterate.
Yeah.
And then, so that from a, I hate the phrase. I don't hate the phrase, it's just overused, but, fail forward, fail fast, all those things. Yeah. Fundamentally, it's just A/B testing all the time. You're able to do that much, much faster, but crucially, you're empowering your staff to make these decisions, which is a huge cultural tenet, right, for any organization. So, you can start to bring in, staff retention and employee satisfaction, all of these things. If I was an employee of any organization with no access to AI to help augment I probably wouldn't want to stay at that company today, regardless of what job I'm in. So it's all quite secular. It all comes back.
Completely agree. No, and it's really interesting to hear it from your side as well, seeing it firsthand and kind of experiencing that with these organizations. It's a really interesting kind of deep dive into that. I'm going to ask one last question if I can, Ben, before we kind of wrap this up. And thank you very much for joining us. It's been really insightful. For someone listening who might be, going about their data strategy at the moment, or are kind of really thinking into, how do I take some of the points raised here and put them into action almost? Is there a golden nugget almost, or a top tip that you would give in terms of, how to actually really go about embedding data and AI into an organization and extracting that pure business value that we've touched on today?
And there's a long list of things.
Long list, yeah.
I'm trying to think of what the first thing if I was a CDO, fresh blank piece of paper data strategy today, assuming that you've got complete CEO sponsorship, right, and there's a genuine appetite for real change, I would find the correct use case, initiative, data product to build, to prove that AI can be industrialized in your organization with something that can be measured. An output that can be measured. And that could be revenue up, it could be cost down, margin improvement, days in inventory, reduce waste. It could be, we're working with one customer, their first use case is loss prevention because of staff stealing stuff, right?
Right, okay.
There's any number of ways it's measurable, but that use case can't be in isolation. It has to be
into an intrinsic kind of business value, something that you can really play back and measure back.
You can extrapolate how that was deployed, right? It proves an operating model. It proves the plumbing of the data, so the underlying data platform, as well as just a shiny downstream interface of the data product you're building. It needs to be an end-to-end steel thread. But it doesn't need to be heavyweight. You do not need to boil the ocean for the first use case, the first data product, whatever it is you're doing. But it should be challenging, and it should be a business problem that you've struggled to solve, not a technology problem you struggle to solve.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. So if you focus and start with the outcome, find an internal stakeholder, which will not be someone in IT. There will be a business stakeholder. You don't need to tell anyone that. Something that they've never been able to solve. Let's solve it together, and we'll build it together. Fundamentally, is our approach, whether you're Snowflake or not. Build it, prove it, and make sure going into that everyone understands what you're proving. Get the sponsorship required, and then showcase that. And then that should be the proof point to then get the financial sponsorship to drive an AI transformation program. I wouldn't try and I wouldn't go boil the ocean day one, but I also wouldn't go, right, we're going to over the next 5 years deliver these things. No. There needs to be a level of gumption. I've never met a change agent with a C-level job title that didn't have an unbelievable amount of gumption and self-belief in what they're trying to deliver. And I think that's arguably, to be quite controversial, I'd argue that across public organizations, consensus is sometimes required too much. If you try and gain, if you have every single executive, every executive minus one, that's an amalgamation of an unbelievable amount of opinions. That's almost too democratic, right? If you're a chief data officer or a COO, you've been hired with a charter, with an outcome that is your responsibility to drive. A level of gumption should come with that, and then that might come across as pretty obvious, and I'm sure it will be to a lot of people. But back your belief in AI transformation and don't wait.
Yeah, back yourself and back your AI. I think that's a really good kind of wrap up point there to summarize, because I think from what we see with organizations, those that really kind of take that front-footed approach, I'm going to mirror what you said earlier, but fail forward, really kind of put that on the front foot and actually drive those AI and data initiatives. 100% of them are not going to work out 100% of the time. We know that. But for those that do, where it's tied back to that business value, that's where the real efficiency gains can be realized. And I think, that's where, as we say, moving forward, those that are going to set themselves apart and not even that, those that are going to keep up are those that are going to adopt this technology. So no, certainly, Ben, that's been a really helpful insight. Thank you for all those points there and that advice. I hope we can manage to get another of these lined up at some point. But in the meantime, it's been great to have you on, and look forward to hopefully catching up again sometime soon.
Likewise. Thanks, Chris. Great to be here.
Thank you all for listening.